This July, 4 UK scientists go to Iceland in order to further our understanding of past habitable environments on Mars and how we can detect them using robotic space technology. So we're here on this trip to test two things. Firstly, the prototype of the panoramic camera instrument, which will form a really fundamental part of the instrument payload on the European Space Agency's ExoMars rover. Secondly, we're going to be combining aerial remote sensing spectral data with ground-based reflectance spectroscopy in order to see how best to identify evidence of past habitable environments on Mars, particularly those environments that are formed through the action of volcanism and liquid water.
We can only kind of really understand how a planet has formed and evolved by applying what we've learned from the Earth. And so everything we do in the field out here in Iceland, we apply to Mars as best we can. And so we can really test how the instruments work on the rovers, how to best utilize their resources. So how close do we have to get to a rock to really understand its composition, for example, or how safe is something to drive over, from using these cameras in these kind of field terrains.
One of the other things we're doing is testing different types and different scales of reflectance spectroscopy. So aerial reflectance spectroscopy, and then the same sort of stuff but taken from ground level. And these are the kind of techniques that frequently get used in Martian exploration, which is why we want to make sure they're working in the right way and exactly how we analyse that data to get the best out of it.
So everything we do on Mars is actually driven by looking at the surface from satellites orbiting the planet for a few hundred kilometres above the surface, and we use those data sets, the images, the hyperspectral data, the topography, to actually try and target regions on the surface that are interesting for further study. So then we find somewhere that's interesting, and then we can decide whether it's safe to send a rover there and whether the science at that site is actually good enough.
Sort of greyish soil, if you want to get that one.
You've done that one.
Done that one.
That's it now. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, and then I think the rest were up there, so it might not be seeable.
So reflectance spectroscopy is spectroscopy using a light source that's already there, just reflecting off of the surface of what you're looking at. So in the case of planetary exploration, that light source is the sun.
So this is a bit of string that is 18 metres long, and I have marked it out to show every 2 metres of the bit of string. So what I want to do this for is so I can measure out an 18 metre bit of ground, and then I'm going to take measurements every 2 metres so I can see how the ground is changing over that 18 metres.
So in Iceland we are specifically looking for the kind of minerals that form in hydrothermal environments. So in the case of this field work, we are actually collecting samples of the soils and the rocks that we're finding, and we'll take them back to the laboratories in our universities and analyse them using other techniques to see exactly what those minerals are, to make sure that what we thought we saw with the remote sensing data is correct.
Well, probably one of the most important things that these rovers can look for is evidence of water in the past of Mars's history. And so we do that by looking for evidence of alteration, so looking at kind of what were originally lava flows that have kind of solidified, and then millions of years later water might have come along and kind of altered those rocks, and we can look for the chemical signature of that alteration in the rocks and the minerals that are present today.
So this is the PanCam emulator, so it has 3 cameras. The 2 on the outside are wide-angle cameras, which both look at the same thing, so we can build up stereo images from this. And in front of each one you have these filter wheels. So contained within these filter wheels are 11 filters, 3 of which are the same in each camera, and they are broadband red, green and blue filters to allow us to build up just a plain colour image like you would see from a normal digital camera. And then the remaining ones are specifically geological filters. These ones are split between the 2 filters, so you have different ones, and they cover a wavelength range between about 400 nanometers to up to about 1000 nanometers.
So what we're doing on this analogue field trip is trying to do what we do on Mars. So we use data from above our heads, in this case from an aeroplane looking down, and to see the kind of signature of the chemistry going on. And then we come here with our field kit with our cameras, and we try and look at the same deposits actually on the surface in situ, so we can compare the two, because this is exactly the same process that we use for exploring Mars.
On the top we have 3 cameras bolted to this optical bench. The whole of the optical bench is then bolted onto this pan tilt unit, which allows the computer to point the cameras in any direction you preset. The whole thing is then mounted on top of this tripod. So the cameras are all connected through an Ethernet connection back down to this box down here. And that box contains a complete computer system and battery pack and all the electronics to control the pan tilt unit. And basically that's the brain for the whole system. The laptop I have in my hand here is then plugged into that, and that's just used for setting it up and controlling what it's doing. But the computer that actually controls everything is inside there. In order to power the whole thing in the field, although it's got a battery in it, it has a very limited reserve of power. So we actually tend to run everything on a car battery, which is a very heavy looking blue thing at the bottom, which is then used to provide a main supply with an inverter, and that's used to power everything else. So we have complete mains electricity in the field.
What we're on here at the moment is what we call a Moberg Ridge, and that's a ridge that's been formed by basaltic lava erupting into overlying glacial ice. And this happened during the last ice age, when the whole of Iceland was covered in an enormous ice cap. And what happens is that this lava erupts into the ice and it solidifies, forming a mountain range, because it can't flow anywhere because it's being held up by the ice surrounding it. And this has since been exposed by the ice age gradually retreating, and it's left this ridge behind us that we can see here. And this has been gradually altered over time by lots of geothermal activity, producing these sort of orange and red hues that we can see in the landscape. And these are different alteration minerals, and this is exactly why we're here, to use this as a really good geological analog for doing Mars research and testing Mars rover instrumentation.
Here we're surrounded by this really white-looking rock, which is actually rich in a mineral called gypsum. And gypsum is really common on the Earth. It's a mineral that forms when you have water. And it turns out that gypsum is actually probably really common on Mars as well. And so over the last 10 years or so, the orbiting spacecraft around Mars have actually detected the chemical signature of gypsum on the surface in large deposits. And so in a couple of locations, rovers have actually landed, both Opportunity and Curiosity in their landing sites have actually found gypsum veins, very much like these gypsum veins here, that are rich in this calcium sulfate mineral that contains water, probably formed when water was around earlier in Mars's history, and may well kind of conserve or protect possible life from the past.